On the 26th of May 2026, the Scottish Parliament voted 72 to 55 to demand the power to hold another independence referendum. It was the fourth time since 2012 that Scotland's Parliament has asked London for that power. The answer again was no. In 2014, Scotland voted on independence directly, 55.3% against, 44.7% in favor, on turnout of 84.6%, the highest of any UK-wide vote in the era of universal suffrage. 2 years later, the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. Scotland itself voted 62% to remain. It left anyway, as part of the UK. In 2022, the United Kingdom's Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the Scottish Parliament cannot legislate for a second referendum on its own. That power is reserved to Westminster under the Scotland Act of 1998. 1707. The kingdoms of Scotland and England merge into Great Britain by Act of Union. 1997. Scotland votes to create its own devolved parliament, which opens in 1999. 2011. The Scottish National Party wins an outright majority at Holyrood, something the voting system was designed to prevent. 2012. The Edinburgh Agreement. London and Edinburgh agree to a Section 30 order, legally clearing the way for a referendum. September 16, 2014. 2 days before the vote, with polls tightening, the leaders of all three major UK parties signed the vow, a public pledge of extensive new powers for Scotland if it stays. September 18, 2014. Scotland votes number 2016. The Scotland Act delivers new powers under the Smith Commission process. June 2016, the Brexit referendum. 2017, the Scottish government requests a second Section 30 order. The UK government refuses. 2022, the Supreme Court rules Holyrood has no unilateral power to legislate a referendum. May 2026. The SNP wins a fifth consecutive Holyrood election. Parliament votes 72-55 to request Section 30 again, and the UK government declines again. The Scottish government's own publications describe the United Kingdom as, in their words, a voluntary union of nations, one that a constituent nation can choose to leave if its people decide to. Their argument for a second vote rests on precedent and change. Precedent. In 2011, Scots elected a majority explicitly committed to a referendum, and the UK government of the day accepted that mandate and negotiated the Section 30 order that produced the 2014 vote. Change. In 2016, Scotland voted to remain in the European Union and was taken out anyway, as part of a UK-wide result. A shift in circumstances the Scottish government argues never existed in 2014. First Minister John Swinney's government made securing an SNP majority in 2026 and using it to force the Section 30 question back onto the table within the Parliament's first 100 days, its explicit governing priority. The UK government's position rests on law and timing. Legally, the Scotland Act 1998 reserves matters concerning the Union to Westminster, and the 2022 Supreme Court ruling confirmed that Holyrood cannot get around that on its own. On timing. After Scotland voted no in 2014, Prime Minister David Cameron said the question was settled for a generation, perhaps for a lifetime. Alex Salmond's own phrase, borrowed back and hardened into a promise Salmond himself had once called just his personal estimate. Successive UK governments since have repeated versions of the same line. Boris Johnson's now is not the time among them, while pointing to the cost of living, the NHS, and the economy as the shared priorities constitutional argument keeps interrupting. The phrase carrying the most weight in this entire dispute was never a law. Once in a generation came from Alex Salmond in his own foreword to the Independence White Paper, and he later said plainly it was his own estimation, not a binding term, modeled loosely on the gap between 1979 and 1997. David Cameron treated it as a settled boundary anyway. No disputes, no reruns. A decade later, Boris Johnson was still citing the same unofficial phrase to justify refusing the very request it was never meant to restrict. Two governments have spent over a decade extracting opposite, binding conclusions from 6 words neither side ever wrote into an agreement. And notice what hasn't happened here. No unilateral vote held in defiance of a court, no security forces sent to close polling stations, Every round of this argument, win or lose, has gone through a parliamentary vote, a court, or a press statement. A democratic mandate at home and a legal veto from the center can both be entirely real at the same time. Neither cancels the other out, and neither one on its own decides what happens next. This series has already asked where history begins, who counts the dead, what history is even made of, and who gets to decide what a gesture means. Scotland adds one more: who decides when it's time to ask a settled question again? Next time, another region, another independence movement, another constitutional court ruling on whether a vote can happen at all, except this time, one side held the vote anyway. Catalonia.